All right, so this is Fiat. This is where you can deposit. This is your DeFi bank for all things on PulseChain that we care about, and the things on ETH that we care about, like Hex, Hedron. Sheeb is in there for the kind of underserved communities naturally, right? Because little did you know, everybody, Hex is gatekept pretty much everywhere, right? People were the black sheep of crypto, right? So there's a lot of DeFi products that are for everybody else, but not for us. Well, here we go. Now we have our own dedicated Aave fork, right? This is the bank for hexagons, okay? Naturally, as just a regular user, you could be a depositor of your hex, right? You could borrow a stable coin to free up a little bit of cash flow, so you can conduct business in the real world outside of crypto, right? You can start whatever you want. You can buy your Lamborghini, you can buy your Rolex, and you can pay back the loan at your leisure, right? Which is fantastic, because before, if you're a large hex guy and you wanted some cash, you had to sell the price, which kind of sucks for your bag in general, right? So that's one of the great use cases, and probably where many people will use this platform. One of the more intricate ways that you can use this platform is to leverage yourself or hedge your positions, right? So, when the training wheels come off, because they're on right now, so the actual market that you're able to deposit for Hex, for instance, is completely full at the moment, right? And that's for the platform's protection, okay? But once those come off, you can come in here, deposit Hex, you could borrow a stable coin against your Hex and go buy more Hex on the market. And you can lever up, you can get a little bit more exposure to the price movement, okay? And the inverse of that, you could deposit, Bitcoin, Ethereum, stable coins, and then you can go borrow Hex and sell it on the market. You can open up a short, which is fantastic, right? Richard's been asking for something like that for years now, and it is finally here. You're now able to short Hex, and just I think yesterday or maybe 10 hours ago, somebody was liquidated for shorting Hex, and their collateral, which was USDC, was used to go buy the Hex that they owed off the market, and subsequently they moved the price up a little bit. So
thank you for your sacrifice, Dylan. Appreciate you doing a dry run on that one.
Wasn't me.
Or was it actually Peter McCormick? Which one?
Wasn't me. It was just some random dude, man. You can check my account. I have it publicly. The account I'm on right now. My ass did not get liquidated, and I opened up a short and front ran some dumper, emergency unstaked 30 million Hex, and he dumped all of it. So I got a nice 10% profit on that, actually. So yeah.
Right. So that's a good case study. Like how much X's did you go? Can you tell us about that? And like this great case study, I think.
Yeah, so I just used 50% of my my bag here to short. I didn't, lever up or anything like that. I just It was just 50% of my bag. Open up a short. Like I'll open up a short for you now, actually, because I tried to do it
live. I like it.
I tried to do it on Crypto Cabana, but my transaction got stuck when I was depositing some USDC.
Triple that gas. All right.
Yeah, exactly. This time. So I'm going to borrow 50,000 Hex against my 6,000 USDC. Okay. When you do this stuff, you have to pay attention to your health factor. Okay. Your health factor is basically how close you are to being liquidated. Okay. So the lower the number goes, if it goes below 1, you start to be put up for liquidation. Okay. And what'll happen is your collateral will start to be sold off until, 1, your loan is no longer worth more than your collateral. Okay. So, or your collateralization level, or 2, you're completely liquidated, right? So there's a certain point where if you're down a certain amount on your loan versus your collateral, it'll just liquidate everything all at once. Okay. But if it's, like at 99 or 0.99 for your health factor, it'll just it'll shim off or shave off a little bit of your collateral to pay back the loan until it goes back above 1, right? So keep that in mind. The higher, the better. Okay. And so I'm going to borrow, and I'm going to make sure that so I'm borrowing 50K hex, which is $2,800. And I'm going to make sure it's aggressive. There we go. And we're going to wait for that to go through. So, but essentially what I did, again, I have $6,000 as collateral. Okay. I can borrow 75% of that. So I'm borrowing, instead of maxing out my position, which would get me closer to a liquidation price, which I don't want to happen. I borrowed a little bit, maybe about half of my position to open up a short, right? So now once this goes through, okay, so it just went through. I'm going to go to Uniswap. All right. I go to Hex. I want USDC. I click Max. And I then swap for USDC, and I would officially be short. Just like that.
Wow.
It's just that easy.
And is it, so that's one way to short. Are there other, like on the platform, would you always do it like this? Or is there other ways to like, like use leverage and stuff like that? Like it's just,
okay, so there are ways to lever up a lot, which I'm not smart enough to do, because you need to know how to do flash loans. Okay, which you can do flash loans with this just like you can with Aave, and essentially it would look something like you borrow, you deposit, then you borrow, then you redeposit like a derivative, like on Aave, you would redeposit your P USDC or your Aave A USDC, okay, and then and then you basically are borrowing against your collateral and then redepositing it again and then borrowing again. Kind of, it's very complicated, and you can try this with Furu combo on Aave, but they don't soon they'll support us, but they haven't supported us yet. But anyways, and then you would get levered exposure to whatever you're trying to trade. Okay, but shit like that, I would probably I'd probably stay away from, and just at that point on PulseChain, you just use famous, right? That's easy. You click a button, you click how much leverage you want, and you press long or short. It's really easy, and that's extremely complicated. Versus, yeah, and in your leverage, you're only getting maybe 3x, 5x, and it's too much work for doing that type of stuff, right? So
just to recap on this one, so you borrowed Hex, and then you sold it on the market for USDC.
That's right.
And then, so what is the plan for this? Like, how is this how would this be a strategy someone would do? Like,
so,
I'm not saying like you shouldn't. I'm not saying we should short Hex. Like everyone says, don't do that. But just in general, people who have this in mind because they want to short Hex, what's going through their mind? Like, how do you actually end to end? How does this complete?
Yeah. So to complete the you're short here, right? So you just rebuy your Hex, right? So if I try and do it right now, not only am I going to owe more Hex by the time depending on how long you open your loan, right? And depending on how, my camera died, sorry. But depending on how long you're holding up your loan or anything, will depend on how much you owe back, right? So if the price falls dramatically, then the Hex that you're rebuying is much cheaper, and you don't have to buy as much back, right? So let's say you were trying to get like a 100% return on your short. You literally have to wait till Hex went to near zero to get 100%, right? So you're skimming at this point, right? So you're not getting like 10,000% return for shorting Hex to zero. Like that's not going to happen. This is a low leverage thing that you're using, right? Whereas if the price goes up against you, your collateral is then used to go buy the hex at a higher price than you thought possible, which then pushes up the price higher. Which, if there's multiple shorts open, that could cause a cascade of liquidations, right? And then same thing goes for going long as well. If the price falls and you're long hex, then you get liquidated, then you push the price down a little bit more, and then perhaps you liquidate the next guy, and then et cetera, right? But I think on a natural market situation, you'll probably see that using the leverage kind of evens the market out and causes a little bit less volatility, because you have people basically pointing a gun at each other, right? Like, okay, well, what are you going to do? Well, they got their gun pointed at this other guy, and well, what is he going to do? And then they got their guns pointing back at you, and like, what are you going to do? And et cetera. And so they're all kind of hesitantly pointing up leverage to see who's going to make the first move, and then buying back in when that move happens, or selling when that move happens, et cetera, to lock in their profits and whatnot. So I think the market evens out more so than it does get more volatile with the leverage and whatnot. But I'm ranting.
Interesting.
No worries. Do you have something, Graphics?
Well, I was going to ask, I remember Buck talking about this a while ago. I was watching him talk about shorts, and I think the conversation I'm really interested to hear from you as well is talking about, he specifically was talking about how using a short position during like a bear market as like more of like a safety net, in terms of using a small part of your position to go short. And if the price goes down, you capitalize on it. And if the price goes back up, I can't remember how he was describing it, but there was like a non-trader's like looking at this from more of like a opportunistic in a short window kind of perspective to a opportunistic longer time horizon. I remember what he was, I can't exactly remember how he was talking about it, but it was really interesting. Do you know what I'm referring to here?
Yep, it's called hedging. And that would be a fantastic thing to do on Famous, right? So on this, you're affecting the spot price, okay? But you're mostly probably going to be using this to, let's say, borrow, ETH and Hex, and then depositing it into like a pair, okay, like a liquidity pair or something like that, right? And then paying off your loans as you get the APY, okay? Or say you're depositing Hex and then just providing liquidity versus some stable coins or something like that. I don't know, but that's probably what you are going to mainly be using this fiat for, right? However, for what you're describing is a hedge, which you can do here, but you just can't lever up like you can on Famous, which is much easier to open up a levered short position with a portion of your bag to protect against downside risk if you think the market is getting frothy. So you wouldn't be hedging yourself at the bottom. That's probably not a good idea. You would probably want to do that when you see people dancing on coffins and shit like that, right? That's probably when you want to open up. Okay, all right, well, I'm going to use 1% of my bag here because hey, if people are doing some crazy shit where it's maybe a top signal, I lever up 10x, then if it starts to go down, then I'm okay with my hex stakes continuing to stay there. I open up a short, I'm good, right? I'm not getting negative 50% now. Maybe I'm only down 20% or 30% at that point, right? Because I opened up a short. And then inversely, if you're at the bottom and you think that the market may fall more, so you're not completely convinced, so you don't deploy your capital, but just to protect against the upside, you open up a levered long with a portion of your bag. So, if the market starts to double like it did, at the 1.8 area, and then, we went up to 13 cents, basically, that long would have basically had your average price, if you decided to FOMO buy back in, it would have been less of a shock than if you didn't have that long opened at the time, right? So, those are just excellent ways to hedge with Famous, right? You can do this. Longing with leverage is a lot easier than, in my opinion, shorting with leverage. I wouldn't short with leverage on this, but you can. But I would rather long with leverage. If I think it's a bottom and I'm certain, I would use Fiat to open up a leverage long, which Buck opened up a leverage long on Hex actually recently. So,
Well, how would we open a regular long? So when Buck did it, that was on PulseChain testnet, I guess.
No, this was on mainnet.
Oh, so on Ethereum mainnet.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So it would just basically. Are you guys familiar with like the haunted strat?
Yeah. Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, you do that where you deposit your Hex, you borrow stablecoin, you deposit the Hex you just bought onto to Fiat, then you borrow more stablecoins, then you deposit more Hex after you buy it, right, etc. And then eventually you get really close to where you can't do anything, and then that's when it's very dangerous, but it's very possible for you to do. I'm not going to do that with a short, but you could.
So you borrow, so you buy Hex and deposit it, and then you lost me on that. So wouldn't it just be the opposite of what you just did? Wouldn't it be like, or something like that?
Yeah. So what I did now was I went short. Okay. So that looks like me depositing a stable coin or any other coin that's not Hex, and then I borrow Hex and sell it. And if I sell it for the thing that I originally deposited, I could deposit the thing I just sold my Hex for again onto Fiat and go borrow more Hex and then sell it again, et cetera, et cetera. But you're getting to where you're getting more exposed to price, and you're more likely to be liquidated at that point, right? The inverse of that is, go ahead.
I was going to say, so basically what you're saying is the deposit side is like basically, so what you're borrowing is what you're expecting to decrease in price relative to your deposit. Your deposit side is essentially going to increase in ratio to what the value of what you're borrowing is.
Precisely. So I think Hex is going to go down, right? So, I deposited a stable coin, which I don't think is going to go down. And then I sold the Hex that I borrowed, and I'm waiting for it to go down in price so I can buy it back at a lower price than I sold it for. And then I can pay off my loan. So it makes sense. I lost my mic. Does that make sense?
But if you're longing Hex, I guess
it's the opposite. You deposit your Hex, then you borrow USDC, you go buy more Hex.
And you go buy more Hex. That's the key piece. Yep. Okay, gotcha.
Because Hex is going to go up in value relative to the USDC.
Exactly. Because then to pay back your loan, you have to go and sell your Hex back for USDC.
So when Hex price, so the working out scenario is, if you're right and Hex price goes up, then you can just pay off your loan and you got a profit.
Exactly. Yeah. You remember, because Hex went up in price, so now you don't have to sell as much Hex to pay back your loan. So you get to keep the Hex that you have as profit, right? And then you pay back your USDC, and then now you can free up your collateral, right? Which is Hex in that situation.
Perfect. Love it. We'll do one more question on, let's see. So I had a few questions on Fiat. One more before we move on. This is amazing though, Dylan. Like, you guys have done a really good job with this. And it is the bank in like a very cool way of saying the bank for PulseChain. Like,
oh yeah.
I've got one question whenever we get a chance. I want to hear you. All right, you go first, bro. My man.
No, sure. I was just going to pick one out of the chat. I just didn't want to ignore chat, but yeah, go for it. And we'll take one from the chat after yours.
What do you think is what do you think, just on side of PulseChain, what is the greatest benefit to the ecosystem that Fiat brings to the table, or maybe the largest couple benefits to the ecosystem?
Sure.
A handful.
I think the ability to hedge your positions and borrow against your Hex or Hedron is a very valuable thing that we haven't seen the outcomes of yet, right? So I think that since in this last cycle we only had the ability to sell your Hex for cash that you needed, right? Whereas now you don't have to sell your Hex for cash. You could just deposit and borrow the cash, which is a great innovation that we're coming out of the Stone Age and we're starting to go into the age of okay, I'm going to build a house now and I'm going to live in a house instead of living in a cave. You know what I mean? So, it could turn out to be a situation where, Hex could have more upside potential than it would have had without this sort of platform, right? I also think that being able to borrow and perhaps provide more liquidity that you may not have at the moment, right? So let's say you have a lot of stable coins at the moment, right? But you don't have any Pulse or PulseX. Okay, that's a pretty terrible situation, right? But you want to provide liquidity for Pulse and PulseX because it's printing tons of incentive token relative to the amount or the price you would pay to borrow the Pulse and PulseX, and you kind of still want to sit in your stable coins or something like that, right? Then you can borrow Pulse and PulseX, deposit it in the liquidity pool, and let that baby ride, right? And pay off your loan as it goes, right? You could do this if you only had Pulse, and you take half your bag, you borrow PulseX, you go deposit it in the liquidity pool, and you pay your loan off with the incentive token, right? If there's a dip versus Pulse and PulseX again, right? And you don't want to completely get rid of your Pulse, right? But you think that PulseX is going to run, or things like this, you could, for instance, you could borrow you could borrow a stable coin and then buy PulseX versus your Pulse. You could do something like that, right? And then you would get the exposure for PulseX. That's a little bit complicated, but definitely something you could do, right? If you're strapped for cash at the moment, right? But yeah, I mean, there's tons of ways you can use this stuff, right? It just depends on how much you want to learn about it, and if you want to take the opportunities that are presented, right? So